There is a tree that bleeds. Cut the bark, red liquid runs out, thick, dark, like a wound. The ancients called it dragon's blood. They killed for it. They traded it for gold. It heals wounds, stops bleeding, fights infection. It grows on one island and nowhere else on Earth. And that island is dying. The tree is vanishing. And the 3,000-year-old secret it carries is about to vanish with it. Watch what happens when the blade goes in. The bark splits, and from the wound, a deep red sap wells up. Not pink, not orange, crimson, the exact color of blood. It runs down the trunk in thick lines and dries into hard red crystals you can crack off with your fingers. For 3,000 years, people who saw this believed only one thing could explain it. The tree was bleeding, and the blood had to come from something powerful. They decided it came from dragons. That is not a legend I am exaggerating for views. That is the literal origin of the name dragon's blood. And before you write it off as ancient superstition, here is the part that should stop you. Modern science tested that red sap, and the ancients were right about what it could do. Stay with me, because the reason this tree is disappearing is darker than any myth they ever told about it. The tree is called Dracaena cinnabari, the dragon's blood tree, and it looks like nothing else alive on Earth. Picture an umbrella turned inside out. A thick trunk that splits into hundreds of branches, all reaching up and out, packed so tightly at the top that the whole tree forms a dense green dome. From a distance, it looks like a giant mushroom or a flying saucer that landed and grew roots. Some people say it looks like a tree from another planet. They are not wrong. It grows in only one place on the entire planet, and that place is about as close to another planet as Earth gets. Up close, the tree is even stranger. The bark is rough and gray, almost like the hide of an elephant. The leaves grow only at the very tips of the branches, in stiff, sword-shaped clusters, leaving the inside of the canopy hollow and shadowed. And when you make a single cut into the trunk, the tree responds the way a living body does. It bleeds to protect itself. The red resin oozes out, hardens over the wound, and seals it shut, the tree's own way of stopping infection and keeping insects and disease out of the cut. The ancients did not know it, but the moment they learned to use that resin on their own wounds, they were borrowing the tree's own defense system. They were using the tree's blood the same way the tree used it. To seal a wound shut, I'll show you exactly where it grows in a few minutes, and why that one location is now its death sentence. But that danger only makes sense once you understand what this tree was worth. So, before we come back to the island, we have to go back in time. 3,000 years back. Picture the ancient world. No antibiotics, no disinfectant. A small cut could turn into a deadly infection within days. A wound on the battlefield was often a death sentence, not from the wound itself, but from the rot that followed. A soldier could survive the blade and still die a week later from what crept into the cut. Childbirth, surgery, even a deep scratch from a thorn, all of it carried the risk of a slow, feverish death. Healers were desperate for anything that could stop bleeding and keep a wound from going bad. And then traders arrived carrying small jars of hard red resin from a distant island. They claimed it was dragon's blood, and they claimed it could seal a wound shut. It worked. When ground into powder and packed onto a cut, the red resin slowed bleeding almost immediately. It formed a protective seal over the wound, and wounds treated with it became infected far less often than wounds left alone. To an ancient healer, this was nothing short of magic. They had no idea why it worked. They only knew that it did. A substance that could mean the difference between life and death, dripped from the bark of a tree most of them would never see with their own eyes. And so, demand exploded across the entire ancient world. The Romans bought it by the shipload. Roman gladiators reportedly used it on wounds taken in the arena, packing the red powder into gashes to stop the bleeding before the next fight. Greek physicians wrote about it in detail. The famous Greek physician Dioscorides documented dragon's blood as a medicine in the 1st century, describing how it was used to treat wounds, stomach ailments, and diseases of the skin. The ancient Egyptians used it in ritual and medicine. Later, it would be used as a dye, a varnish, even a pigment for paint, the deep red coloring everything from cloth to the wood of violins. It traveled the great trade routes alongside frankincense and myrrh, and like those, it was worth a small fortune. But here is where the story turns dark, because something this valuable in a world this violent was never going to be traded peacefully. The island that produced it became a target. Whoever controlled the trees controlled the supply. And whoever controlled the supply controlled a substance worth more than its weight in many precious goods. Traders guarded the source like a state secret. Think about what that means. In a world without maps, without satellites, without any way to verify where a cargo truly came from, the single most powerful thing you could own was not the resin itself. It was the knowledge of where it grew. That knowledge was power, and men have always been willing to kill to keep power to themselves. So they protected it with fear. Some accounts describe people deliberately spreading terrifying myths about the island. Sea monsters in the surrounding waters, deadly creatures on the shore, cursed and haunted land. specifically to scare competitors away from finding the trees. The dragon legend itself may have been the greatest piece of marketing in the ancient world. If everyone believes the red sap comes from slain dragons on a monster-guarded island, no ordinary trader is going to risk the journey to find out the truth. Keep people afraid. Keep them away. Keep the monopoly. The fear was not a side effect of the legend. The fear may have been the entire point. For centuries, that one location was protected, fought over, and kept deliberately mysterious. So let's finally go there, to the island itself, as it exists today, because it is one of the strangest places on the face of the earth. That island is called Socotra. It sits in the Arabian Sea, off the coast of Yemen, far from almost everything. And it has been cut off from the mainland for so many millions of years that life there evolved on its own separate path, away from the rest of the world. The result is an island where roughly a third of the plant species exist nowhere else on the planet. Scientists call it the most alien-looking place on Earth, and they are not exaggerating. Trees that look like umbrellas, plants that look like they belong on the floor of the ocean. Bulbous, swollen trunks, strange flowers found in no other country. Walking across Socotra has been compared to walking across the surface of another world, and standing all across the dry highlands, the dragon's blood trees, thousands of them, their domed canopies catching the mist, looking exactly like a forest from a dream. That dome shape, by the way, is not random. And what it does is one of the most quietly brilliant survival tricks in the entire plant kingdom. Remember it, because it is also the key to understanding why the tree is now dying. Socotra is dry, brutally dry. Rain barely comes. So how does a large tree survive in a place with almost no rainfall? The answer is in the canopy. Those hundreds of tightly packed branches and stiff, waxy leaves are perfectly designed to catch moisture straight out of the air. When fog and mist roll in over the highlands, water droplets collect on the canopy, gather and run down the branches, down the trunk, and drip into the soil directly around the tree's own roots. The tree literally harvests water from the clouds and waters itself. And the dense dome shades its own roots from the harsh sun, slowing evaporation and locking that precious moisture into the ground beneath it. Think about how clever that is. The tree cannot move to find water, so it built a body that pulls water out of the sky and pours it onto its own feet. It makes its own rain. For millions of years, in one of the driest places on Earth, it worked flawlessly. The shape that makes the tree look so alien is not for decoration. It is a survival machine, refined over an unimaginable stretch of time. And now that machine is failing, not because the tree changed, because the world around it did. And this is the part almost no one is talking about. The climate on Socotra is shifting. The monsoon mists that these trees have depended on for millions of years are becoming less reliable. The island is slowly getting drier. And on top of the slow drying, something more violent is happening. Socotra is increasingly being struck by powerful cyclones, storms that were once rare in this part of the world and are now hitting with devastating force. In recent years, major cyclones have torn across the island and ripped out thousands of dragon's blood trees by the roots. Whole hillsides of them, flattened. A tree that took centuries to grow can be uprooted and destroyed in a single afternoon. And unlike a fast-growing plant, it cannot simply spring back. What is lost for generations. But the storms, as brutal as they are not even the worst of it. The slow killer is quieter and far more dangerous. It is the failure of the next generation. And here's the problem that makes scientists genuinely afraid for this tree. Old dragon's blood trees are still standing all across the island. Many of them are centuries old. From a distance, the forests look healthy and ancient and strong. You could fly over Socotra, look down, and think the tree is doing fine. But when researchers walked into those forests and looked closely, they found something deeply alarming. Almost all of the trees are old. The young ones, the seedlings, the saplings that are supposed to grow up and replace the elders when they finally die, are mostly gone. Why? 2 reasons, working together. First, the seedlings need steady moisture to survive their fragile early years, and the drying climate is killing them before they can take root and establish themselves. Second, the few seedlings that do manage to sprout are being eaten. Socotra's herds of goats have grown over the years, and those goats graze on the tender young plants, stripping away the next generation before it ever has a chance to grow tall enough to survive. So picture the result. You have a forest full of grandparents and almost no children. The old trees are living on borrowed time. And when they finally fall, to a cyclone, to old age, to the slow drought, there is nothing growing underneath to take their place. This is what a slow extinction actually looks like. It is not a sudden, dramatic disappearance. It is a forest that looks perfectly fine today, full of ancient giants quietly going barren underneath. The death is already happening. It is just happening on a timescale too slow for a casual glance to notice. Scientists who study Socotra have warned that the dragon's blood tree population could collapse dramatically over the coming decades, with some projections estimating that a large share of its habitat could be gone within this century. A tree that survived for millions of years, that outlived entire empires, that the ancient world spread monster legends to protect, vanishing within a few human lifetimes, while most of the world has never even heard its name. And here is the bitter irony at the center of all this. For all those centuries, people in the modern age were quick to dismiss the ancient healing claims as superstition. Dragon's blood? A magic resin that heals wounds, surely just a myth dressed up to sell expensive cargo. But then, modern science actually tested it, and the resin really does contain compounds with antibacterial, antifungal, and wound healing properties. The red sap genuinely can help seal and protect a wound. The ancients were not fooled by a fairy tale. They had stumbled onto something real, something that worked, 3,000 years before anyone could explain the chemistry behind it. We are only now confirming what they knew all along. And we are confirming it at the exact moment we are letting the source slip away. So what can actually be done? Is this just a story about loss, or is there still a way to save it? On Socotra, local communities and conservationists have started fighting back, and their main weapon is surprisingly simple. They build walled nurseries, protected enclosures where young dragon's blood seedlings can grow safe from the goats and shielded from the harshest weather, until they are strong enough and tall enough to survive out in the open on their own. It is slow, patient, humble work. These trees grow incredibly slowly, taking years just to reach a small size and decades to mature into the iconic dome shape. To plant one is to plant something you will almost certainly never see grown. It is an act of pure faith in a future you will not live to witness. But it is being done quietly by people on that remote island who refuse to let the tree disappear on their watch. The dragon's blood resin is also still harvested the old way, tapped carefully from the bark without killing the tree, exactly as it has been done for thousands of years, and used in traditional medicine, in dyes, and in local crafts. That sustainable harvest gives the trees real economic value to the people who live alongside them. And economic value, in the end, is often what gives people a lasting reason to protect something. A tree that feeds a family is a tree a family will fight to keep alive. But the honest truth is that the fate of these trees depends on forces much bigger than one island and a few walled gardens. It depends on the climate that feeds them the mist they drink. It depends on whether the cyclones keep coming. It depends on choices being made thousands of miles away by people who have never seen a dragon's blood tree and never will. And that is the part no nursery wall, however carefully built, can fully protect against. So here is where we stand. There is a tree that bleeds red. It heals wounds, exactly the way the ancients always swore that it did. It builds its own rain out of fog. It looks like something lifted from another world. It survived for millions of years, outlasted empires, and was once worth more than gold. And right now, on a single remote island in the Arabian Sea, it is quietly dying out. Most of the people on this planet never even learning that it existed. The ancients believed its blood came from dragons. They were wrong about the dragons, but they were right about the power, and they were right that it was something worth protecting at almost any cost. We are the first generation with the science to truly understand what this tree is and what it can do. And unless something changes, we may also be the last generation to stand beneath a full, living forest of them. The tree still bleeds on Socotra tonight. The old giants still catch the drifting mist on their canopies, still pour it down onto their own roots, still doing the thing they have done for 1,000,000 years. The only real question left is whether anyone will plant enough new ones, fast enough to take their place before the last of the old ones fall. If this vault opens something for you, subscribe and hit the bell. Every like and every share preserves what they tried to erase. The next vault opens soon,